and welcome to another episode of Connecting the Dots, the interview series where we have thought leaders, game changers, and innovators of the media, telco, and pay TV industry share their tips, insights, and learnings. My name is Andy Waltenspiel, and I'm running a Munich-based consultancy for these industries. Today, my guest is Markus Kugler from Coeno, a UX UI agency from Munich. Hello, Markus. Great to have
Hi,
you
Andy.
here.
Good to see you again.
Thanks for joining. So tell our viewers a little bit about Coeno and yourself.
Yeah, so first name Markus, last name Kugler. I'm the founder and managing partner of Coeno, a user experience agency here in Munich. What we do is we create concepts and visual designs for user experiences on set-top boxes, TV applications, mobile apps, websites, but also complex B2B software, for example. With Coeno, we create digital user interfaces for a compelling user experience with a great usability for clients such as Sky Germany, Maxdome, RTL, Deutsche Telekom, Waipu TV, SES, and also international projects, for example, for Etisalat in Dubai or Astro in Malaysia.
Okay. So UI, UX, two terms that everybody uses, but I think it means different things for different people. So can you clarify for us what is what and what's the important thing to care about?
Yes, definitely. So as you've said, UX, UI means different things to different people. I think to most people, UX really means UI. That's what they think about when they hear the term. This is not completely wrong. It's only half the story, though. If you want to make sure that you have a compelling user experience, then you need to look at three phases. So there's this model where you say, of course, there's the actual use of a digital system or product. That's obvious. But then there's also the expected use for that digital product or service. That's the or the anticipations or the expectations that users have towards a use. And then finally, there's the third phase, that is the evaluated use. So what happens is people, they check off in their mind if the goals that they had, their expectations that they had, have been taken care of in a usage session. So have they received the gains that they were looking for? Have their pains been resolved? They do that subconsciously, maybe. Most of the times, actually, it's subconsciously. And if you say that you want to have a good or a positive user experience, then this assessment, this evaluation of the use versus the expectation needs to be positive. So there's a lot more to it than just the actual use.
Okay. So let's take a real world example. Let's take Apple TV, because we hear more and more people launching something or their VOD catalog on Apple TV and Netflix. So if you look at the two, and of course, the tier one operator want usage. So with that angle, how would you see the two?
That's a pretty good question. Let's take a look at, for example, binge watching. You said you want consumption. So what you want is that after one episode, you start the next, and then the next, and then the next. So we actually had a look at the different binge watching user interfaces across different platforms.
Okay.
And probably all of us know what the Netflix binge watching UI looks like. There's this button coming up. It's telling you, hey, this is this many seconds to the next episode. You can decide to watch the credits, which hardly anybody ever does. You want to jump to the next episode, probably get rid of the introduction, which is another feature that Netflix offers, and then you're off in the next episode, continuing to watch. If you look at Apple TV app, funny name, what they do is they offer sort of the same thing. They have a cover that shows, allows access to the next episode as well. But they also show like 3 or 4 different other covers for content that's totally unrelated to what I'm currently watching. Supposedly, it's pushing their service, which means that they sort of know what I've been watching. So they offer me other content that I've been watching in the past. But this is not what is focused on my goal as a user in that specific usage situation, right? I
Yeah.
want to watch the next episode. I don't want to be distracted by other content. So I don't have the numbers, but I would definitely as think that the consumption rate at Netflix is way higher than within Apple TV app, simply because of that feature. It's very similar, but it's not paying into the actual goal of a user as much on Apple TV app as it does on Netflix.
Maybe interesting side note, because I did an interview with somebody on client side analytics. So how would you measure that? I mean, there's people who do that, who can measure. Today, it's often, is it gut feeling? I think this is better than that. So if we take the Apple guy and the Netflix guy, how would they decide? So I like this better, but that's not what you should do. But that's, I think, what happens very often.
Definitely. So especially not only design decision with respect to, if you say, user interface, but also UX decisions, like the example that we just used, because that's UX, that's not just UI.
Yeah.
It's all about, I know the users, I know what they would want. There's my stakeholders that have this other requirement, so this is what it looks like. There's hardly any measurement of how different services with different user experiences perform. I don't know why. Probably because analytics isn't implemented properly. Us coming from a UX perspective, we would love to have measurements of of different behaviors of people on platforms using different user experience solutions. What that would enable us to do is we could create different versions and just test it out, which one works better. What we learned from as a user experience agency is we are highly skilled experts in creating an experience based on great design, but we are not the user. We never are. We're designers. So if we want to get it right, we create hypotheses of how something is supposed to work and how something is supposed to look like. And then we need to test that hypothesis to really find the correct solution for that specific user group, for example.
Good. So back maybe to Netflix. You said Netflix is, I hear you saying, almost like this de facto standard of how to do these video rails or rows. But that means everybody looks more or less the same, which is a problem in itself as well then.
I would argue so, yeah, definitely. So the ever same Netflix rows, they work. So they're a good paradigm. I'm not saying it's a bad paradigm, but all the different services tend to look the same. That's also got to do with the proliferation of Netflix. I mean, they're basically available worldwide on a large range of devices, and very, very many people use that service. Which brings me back to the expectations that I have mentioned earlier. If a lot of people use something in a specific way, that creates conventions, and that conventions influences the expectation that you as a user have how something is supposed to behave and look like. That's why you see Netflix rows all over the place. That works pretty bad if you want to differentiate yourself in the market. And also, it could be the wrong solution for specific contexts of use.
Do you have an example for that?
I mean, yeah, definitely. So we did a project for somebody that owns sports licenses in Germany. And they specifically set out to do a big screen app and to do things differently than just the ever same Netflix rows. What we did then is we did a qualitative study evaluating how people actually want to consume their content. And what we do there is we don't ask them, how do you want to consume content? We go into context interviews and we extract needs that are behind maybe a potential solution. And interestingly enough, what we found out is that first of all, sports users are not sports users. So if you're a fan of ice hockey, then you have totally different needs if compared to a fan of soccer, or compared to a fan of handball, or compared to a fan of volleyball, for example.
Okay.
What they have in common, though, is if there's a game on live right now, when they access the service, they want to be made aware of that right away, because sports is all about the life experience.
Sure.
But what they don't want is, and that would have been an assumption that probably we would have made and stakeholders would have made, they don't want full screen. They don't want to enter the app and just see that one particular live content. So basically the solution then ended up being having different tiles being visible at the same time. And if it is a live content that's available right now, that specific tile shows video content right away. So you get the impression, there's something going on, something is live. Mm-hmm. And this is something that we would have probably not done without talking to users first and getting to know their expectations and then thinking about a solution.
Okay. So is that a takeaway you can generalize, make these interviews with the customers? Is that always the right approach?
It's one way of doing it. So if you really want to make sure that you are doing the right thing and doing it in a way that is really meeting expectations, then yes, you need to talk to users. If you need to either talk to users or you need to observe users using it. That could be the other way of doing it. But you need to involve users. That's the same for all different projects that we do. And not just assume that you know what a video on demand user actually wants, because that's what usually happens.
Yeah, because you're using Netflix yourself.
Exactly.
Okay, so maybe before we come to the $100 million question, where do you think should UX, UI decision or ownership be rooted in a customer organization or in a tier one, let's say, pay TV telco? Is that something there's a design department? Is it marketing? Is it just procurement? Where should it be?
Yeah, I think it definitely needs to be from a role perspective, something that works horizontally, because it has touch points with so many different stakeholders that have certain requirements for how a product, system, or service is supposed to behave and look like. And it's basically the interfering layer or the interface, user interface to the user. So even from an organizational point of view, this is what UX people do. So if they can be in a department that is sort of like a UX, but the way that they work with other departments needs to be in a horizontal way. So it's nothing that coexists to others. It should be really entangled into everyday work.
It's almost a mindset question, right? So, and again, it's not just design, it's the way to think and to design the process.
Yeah, exactly. That's why we also call it human-centered design, and design in that respect really means creating a solution for a user that really is useful and fun to use.
Okay. So now I mentioned already $100 million question. If I gave you $100 million, what would you do with it? And no, you can't buy bikes and boats and cars. It's really for work. So how would you invest $100 million?
I would probably try to create the biggest user panel ever in existence on Earth, and just make sure that we all have the opportunity to gather requirements, to test the stuff that we're doing, just trying to sort of hammer that mindset that you have mentioned into the people's or organizations' heads, so to speak. And you can only do that if you really see the effects. So just me talking about it is one way of doing that. But what we have observed in the past is that if stakeholders in organizations actually see how things differ when they involve real people into their design projects, that's what really makes the difference.
Cool. Markus, lots of topics. So UX and UI is more than design. It's important to learn about to cover the anticipated use, so the expectations, meet the expectations, talk to users. It all sounds so easy, but unfortunately it often gets forgotten, obviously. Well, thank you very much. Let's see when you make the 100 million, whether we see the largest panel on Earth come to life. Interested to hear that. Thanks a lot for being with us and sharing some of your insights and tips and learnings. So, Markus, was great to have you here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Annie. It was a great pleasure. Take care.
Take care. Thanks. Bye bye.